master your message. Like, what is exactly you're saying? Who are you saying it to? And then how are you going to get that message out? Once you can actually articulate that, you're golden.
You are now listening to the Conscious Creative Corner, the intersection of unapologetic lifestyle and creativity. Get ready to be inspired and dive into uncensored truths with tackling business and mental space with other transparent influencers and entrepreneurs. Let our conscious conversation normalize the chaos you may call life. Let's get consciously creative. Today joining us on the Conscious Creative Corner is Keshia, the founder of Boxbreaker Co. Keshia is such an avid believer that God uses creativity as an avenue for healing others. From the young age of 4, she's been actively involved in various creative arenas such as dance, art, drama, and even some poetry. Her latest creative endeavors include being the founder of Boxbreaker LLC, which is a faith-based company that provides marketing, branding, strategic direction, and website design for visionaries, especially for visionaries who are ready to brand God's way. Keshia has an 11-year-long experience in marketing and project management for both corporate and nonprofit sectors. In 10 years of ministry, she has been able to serve others as best as possible through her creativity. She also educates faith-based visionaries on how to clearly organize and communicate their visions to develop sustainability. Let's listen as Keshia explains how to make God the CEO of your business. Let's get into it. Hey, Keshia, thank you so much for joining us on the Conscious Creative Corner.
Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, so I do want to set the atmosphere just because, it's a really chill place to be. Can you tell us what your favorite thing to do on the weekends is?
Favorite thing to do on the weekend would probably be watching Grey's Anatomy and Blacklist with my husband.
Oh my goodness, I love Grey's Anatomy. I started Blacklist.
Yeah.
However, it's one of those shows, right, that you have to pay attention to.
Every single detail.
Mm-hmm. And so I think I'm like on the first season of the second episode. I'm sorry, no, the first season of maybe it is the second or third episode of the first season, and I have to like really pay attention. But Grey's Anatomy, I try not to go on Facebook on certain days because I keep seeing updates, and I'm just like, no, I'm only on season 10.
Right. That happened to me last night. I was on Instagram and I saw like a preview and I had to exit out until I watched it. So I watched it like late last night.
Okay. Well, hopefully for listeners out there, if you don't watch Grey's Anatomy or Blacklist, please go watch it because those things, or those shows I should say, are amazing.
Yes.
We think so, right?
Yep.
All right. So Keshia, when I met you in December, I think it was December or maybe it was November for the blogger event, I was eavesdropping. Not sorry, but I'm glad I did because I heard you mention Giant Slayers, and Giant Slayers is an event that usually happens at my church, and you were talking to a young lady about it, and I was just so amazed because then I kind of inserted myself into your conversation, and I realized that you kind of put on workshops for people, or you were planning a workshop that really had faith at the center of everything. But before that, can you kind of just take my listeners back and kind of share your story on who you are and how you got into your craft?
Yes, awesome. And yes, we appreciate your eavesdropping because it turned into this wonderful podcast encounter. So thanks so much for eavesdropping. But my name is Keshia and I am the owner of Boxbreaker Co. We are a faith-based branding company where we help visionaries to execute strategic outcomes when it comes to website design and branding and marketing strategy. So many times we have the vision and we have the big pieces, but we aren't clear on how to take the vision to complete visuals, right? Because we know that visuals are, I would argue, 90%, of how people know us and how they get to know what we do and what we represent. And so that's really my focus right now. I also, as you mentioned with Giant Slayers, I was a part of that for several years in the area of ministering in dance and just being on the team and being able to just network or fellowship with other young adults. And so I do mime dance as well, ministering through the arts as a creative. And so those are my two areas right now where I'm fully functioning, as a creative.
Yes, and I think when we spoke back in December, I was so like taken aback that you mind, because one of the previous church I used to attend before Rehoboth, I did one piece where we ministered and we mimed, and I was just like, I have so much more respect because I'm a praise dancer, and at the time, we really wanted to mime this piece, and so I kind of stepped into new territory, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is
Right.
harder than it thinks. Like you really have to be led by the Spirit in order to produce what it is that he wants you, or the message he wants you to give. And I feel like I was just so blind, but it was such a great
Mm-hmm.
experience and very, very different than praise
Right,
dancing.
right. I would say that equally, let's challenge whatever this guy has called you to do. I think we can do, like the Bible says, we can do all things through Christ. Definitely, I gravitated towards mime because my facial expressions never turn off. And so God was like, hey, I have a ministry for that, And so
Hmm.
we've been miming ever since, being able to just bring something to life, visual storytelling, if you will.
Right, exactly. And speaking of storytelling, you mentioned brand, and how
Mm-hmm.
Boxbreaker is like a faith-based brand or company. I'm pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure some of my listeners might not be sure what branding really means and
Mm-hmm.
what kind of creativity goes into it. So, do you mind kind of sharing with us what branding means to you and how you master it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the analogy that I like to think of, branding is like, think of an entire person. When you look at a person, you often get to know what they look like on the inside. And then when they talk, you get to hear, how they sound. You get to have this perception of them, what type of person they are, what they like. You base all of that essentially, when you meet someone for the first time, you can kind of grasp all of that information in a matter of 1 minute to 3 minutes, right? And so branding
Mhm.
essentially is just the perception that your audience or, the community has of you when it comes to what you do, who you serve, how you do it. So it's your personality. It's, if you were a person, they would say, what's your personality like? Branding is the same thing. We think about it as, what's the personality of your company? What's the personality of your product?
Mhm.
Are you fun? Are you more sophisticated? Do you target just women and you're very feminine, or are you universal? So the key to proper branding is really mastering your message. A lot of people start with the visuals, and so that's what I really promote. Boxburger Co. is that you actually have to go back, and master your message. Like, what is exactly you're saying? Who are you saying it to? And then how are you going to get that message out? Once you can actually articulate that, you're golden. So that's like my three-step formula for proper branding, and then the definition of what I would describe. It's the personality of what you do.
I love that. That analogy is
Yeah.
so powerful, like your personality. Because when I think of branding, I typically really only gravitate towards like the visual and like what person sees. I'm not a branding expert,
Right.
right?
Right.
But when you think about it, I know I forget who says this, or I don't know if I make this up myself, but I think I might have heard it in passing. Like branding is what people say about you or your business when you're not in the room, and that makes so much
Correct.
sense, right? um,
Yeah.
when you're thinking about a person's personality, like, oh yeah, Keshia, she's so bubbly, she's so funny, like that's what you want people
Right.
to think about, if that's your goal in your business or what have
Right.
you, but that's what you want people to think about when they're talking about your business. And
Right.
I think one of your pillars, right, in Boxbreaker Code, or I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you want to call it like a pillar,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something about like branding God's way. What does that
Yes.
mean?
Yeah, so you're right. It's definitely a pillar, definitely the foundation. Branding God's way is when you just take the spiritual strategy and you mix it with the natural strategy. And when I say that, I mean, number one, seeking God, and what He's called you to do and how He's called you to do it and the timing He's called you to do it, right? Because a lot of times we have these great ideas, but hey, not the right time, right? And then you take the natural strategy where it's not just God gave me the vision, I'm going to run with it and woohoo, day one, we're going to, have 1 million followers and 1 million sales. You actually have to put natural marketing and branding strategy. You have to do research. You have to do tests. You have to run some analytics. You have to do some mock-ups for your design. And so I really want to just educate people on the importance as faith-based believers, as Christians, is that you have to have a mixture of both. And I see so many people that either sway either to the left or to the right, and so we are all about, when you say the pillar of branding God's way, just mixing both, the spiritual strategy and the natural strategy together, letting God lead, essentially.
Right. I like that. So it stood out to me because I've never heard anyone say that before. And it's something that we probably overlook too. Um,
Mm.
when you're working with clients, how do you introduce that to them, or do you only work with faith-based clients?
Yeah, that's a great question, and actually something that we been working on developing, in the last year, and how we've really narrowed down our niche to faith-based visionaries, because a lot of times we infuse it through, when I jump on the call with them, I'm doing a consultation, I might ask, can I pray with them first? I might, when they ask me, what do I think? Or, spiritually, or what do I see? I might say, hey, the Lord's kind of showing me that, this color that you're, you're trying to go for is not really what, matches, your brand. And so we infuse that through prayer, scripture as well. Like my clients and I could sometimes dialogue about, certain scriptures they read, or how their vision was birthed, and it may have come from scriptures. And so it's infused in everything we do. We're not necessarily quote unquote preaching, right, when we're branding God's way, but it's just about making him the head. I've also been able to tell clients, that were maybe confused or not sure what they wanted to do, like, hey, go take some time to pray, and we'll connect next week and we'll follow up and see what the outcome was, and that was something that, if I'm transparent, was hard for me in the beginning, because how do you tell someone, like, hey, you should go, pray about that? It's like, what?
Right.
Who are you? But as I started to be obedient, people were so appreciative of the fact that I wasn't just helping them. Because I always say, like, I'm not here just to throw a website together, to throw some social media. Like, anyone can do that, right? But it's about the long term. It's about longevity. And so if you're really praying, you're really sure that this is what God has called you to do, you're going to take your time. You're going to put 100%. You know what I mean? It's not just something that you just do, sporadically. And so my clients started to appreciate that, and they began to, speak to me and declare to me, like, Keshia, you have to, start doing this more. And I'm like, all right, praise God. So we're
Well, there
still
you
in that
go.
journey. Because my background is, I do have 10 years of marketing experience, and I do have a degree in marketing. So I started my full-time company last year after I left my corporate job that I worked at for 11 years. And so for me, I have the corporate capacity where, I could be a consultant, if you will, that's not to faith-based entities, but
Mhm.
Boxbreaker specifically is just for, faith-based visionaries. I believe that faith, honestly, 90% of people infuse faith anyway in what they do, whether they consider themselves, a believer or a Christian, So I have both aspects, but Boxbreaker really just tailors to the faith base.
That's really true. That's absolutely true. When you say that, I'm thinking back to just listening to people's conversations, and they do infuse faith and they don't even realize it. I think that's
Right.
amazing though. So you say you have 10 years of marketing experience. Can you kind of take us back to what, I guess, who Keshia was
Mm.
10 years ago? Or you know what, let's take it back 15 years ago. Who were you?
Ooh,
How
what
did
was
this
that?
come about?
Right. Such a deep question there. So the quick version, right, because we have a time limit, is I started the mime ministry with my friend in 2008, I believe. And so when we started miming, we obviously wanted to do things in decency and order and in excellence. And so we began to, have business cards printed, have my robes ordered, have the face paint. We went to conferences, we were educated, and all of these things. And I look back on it now and say, got it. So that was my first marketing, official training, because I had a whole email system, people say, do you want to minister at my church? And I'm like, sure. Can you email us? Can you fill out this form?
Right.
All these contracts and different things. And so that evolved. And then I was in school at the same time for my bachelor's in marketing. And so I had this goal of like working at Google. Like I was just going to be all set because they have such a cool office. I don't know if you've seen it, but like they have showers and you play games and it's like a lounge. And I'm like, I can totally see that. Like, and I get to work. Who wouldn't want to do that? So
Right.
that was like my goal. Like, I'll just be a marketing executive, if you will. Well, the Lord said, no, not so, daughter. So I started at a nonprofit as an intern, actually. And I began to grow up the ladder, if you will. And so I went from an intern to like a program manager. And when I left recently in last year in April, I was the marketing director and the program manager. And so I managed all of the, social media. I also did programming for youth and young adults with behavioral issues and things like that. And so Boxbreaker actually came about because I was doing private consulting 2 years ago, and my friends were, they have all these ideas, and I'm like, yeah, you need a website for that. Like, you can't just put that out there. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do it. You want to do it for me? And I'm like, not really, but sure, right? So I started, and then the Lord kind of awakened me to like, hey, remember you went to school for marketing? Remember you didn't, you're not a Google exec, but you operate in this marketing flow like all the time. My friends are always, my friend actually texted me yesterday, like, do you have our names in your phone by our brand colors? And I was like, no. And then I looked at my phone and I was like, yeah, but I didn't do it on purpose. And she was like, Keshia, this is crazy. So my long story short is that, I work for this nonprofit. I was ended up starting Boxbreaker last year. Had 2 years of doing the private consulting for people and just really seeing it take off. And like I said, just really combining the passion between faith and branding. Because when I originally started, I said, I'm just going to work with individuals, right? It doesn't really matter what you do. But as I began to niche down, in branding and marketing, that's a term that we hear all the time, where the more you niche down and narrow down who you want to work with, arguably you be more profitable because you're speaking to such a narrowed down audience. And so for me, that's how I pivoted into Boxbreaker. The Lord gave me Boxbreaker because I had a conference 3 years ago called the Creative Release, and it was about breaking the boxes. And so he reminded me, hey, the arts is creative release, and as well, this is going to be a part of your business, Boxbreaker. And, I have other things coming down the pipeline with the same theme, but Boxbreaker is really the theme for my life because I was so scared to, and I think I heard about it on your previous episode, but, to do the mime dance and to do branding and to now be a wife, and to now, be an author soon. It's like, oh, I don't want to do all that. Can I just be in one box? But a lot of times we just box ourselves in because, of fear, honestly. And so God's like, he's called us to be ambidextrous, in the spirit realm where we do more than one thing and do it successfully, So I pray that answer your question. That was a mouthful, but.
No, that's amazing. You know what? It's kind of it's one of those things people need to hear, right? Where it's okay because God doesn't call us to be comfortable all the time. We need to step outside of our comfort zone because that's when great things, are fostered and birthed. And for you, I think Boxbreaker and just how it came about, it's powerful in a sense where if I'm thinking literally of a box and you're crushing it and you're stepping outside and there's so much more, like, how much a box can hold. And it just kind of pressed and like, tightly packed. And now here you are, because you got all these things coming out because you listened, and it's one of those things that I'm always asking people, like, are you listening? Do you really hear when God's speaking to you? Because people think there's this like grandiose noise where it's sound or voice that's supposed to come and he speaks to you.
Right.
He can speak to you very subtly. And so I think this is amazing, like how it came about and just for you to be, it's just a year, right? Is it going to be a year this year or?
It's going to be a year in June.
Wow. So that's
I'm like, yeah, I know. I just thought about that because last year I quit my job, got married, and started a company all in 2 months. So it was like a whirlwind. So now it's like, wow, a year ago, huh? Awesome. It flew by.
I can't, and it's crazy because when you're planning weddings, I'm thinking back to my wedding. Oh my goodness. I felt like I couldn't focus on anything except that. And here you are doing everything.
Girl. I had a whole graphic I was gonna release like last year, like after I played my wedding, called like the branding bride, meaning how I just took all my branding and marketing expertise and I just put it into my wedding. And so my friends are kind of like, do you need help with anything? Like, what are we doing? And I'm like, oh no, I gave them a whole kind of marketing plan for my wedding. It was the funniest thing ever. They were just like, really, Keshia? I'm like, hey guys, it's the easiest way to get it done. So for me, it was so fun to the point where I was like, maybe I'll do wedding planning, eventually, maybe when I'm like 50. I just do the branding part though. I don't want to do all the, other things. But that's what I used to do for my job. Like we used to plan events with like hundreds of people. So I have experience. It's just, like you said, that just takes a lot out of you.
It sure does. And so you used to do, okay, so you used to do that for your job too.
Yeah.
Kind of staying on that line though with branding, what's a common myth that you can think of that you can debunk, I should say, for our listeners right now when it comes to branding, like their business or themselves, because we can be brands ourselves as well?
I think it goes back to what we were saying, and what you said, where, the myth is that I would say visuals over vision. And so people focus on the visuals and, I need a nice logo. I need my website to be popping and my Instagram to be aesthetically. But then when it comes down to get the messaging or the framework or hiring a copywriter or an editor, getting a trademark, getting a license, right? I feel like we go straight to the visuals and we don't take enough time sometimes to build the actual vision. And so that would be my myth, what I mean, that I would debunk today, where build the vision first and then go for the visuals, and when I say build a vision, it's more than just having a business plan, but like I said, making sure you register with your state or your town, your tax office, right? That's a whole another conversation, but making sure like things are in orders, and then making sure you understand yourself what it is you're trying to put out there. Because I see so many people where, you're working on a logo and it's like, well, what do you want for the logo? Well, I don't know. I just want it to pop. I'm sorry, I don't know what that means, right? It's like,
Right.
Well, what is the theme? Who are we going for? Who are we talking to? We're talking to, that's actually, if I could add one more myth, is that my brand is for everybody. That's what I hear people say. Who do you serve? Oh, I serve everybody, girl. You do? Actually, well, if I could follow you for like a year or actually 10 days, probably I could help you and evolve that. Because as believers, we're like, everyone, God has called me, but even Jesus had 12 that followed him and 3 that he only kept close. And
Right.
so your brand is the same way, where it's like you're not attracting everyone. There's somebody for everybody. And, branding and marketing is so quote unquote oversaturated, because you can get a brand and marketer on, Fiverr for $5, or you can pay thousands of dollars to have, someone customly do your website and your logo and all of that. And so, we really just have to pay attention and be careful, because it's not for everybody, you know what I mean? And just really narrow down who we're working with. So those would be like my top 2.
I like that. I definitely do, especially because it's visions over visual all the time. And you can have
Yes.
a pretty site or what have you, but really what's your goal?
Yes.
What do you want us to display? And that must be hard to do, especially when someone doesn't have a vision,
Yes.
And I'm
And
pretty
that's
sure
why I keep updating my sales page to say, like, when you have this, I'm ready to work with you. And that was hard for me, because I kept attracting clients that, like you said, they would just start out and they wouldn't really know. And so it was frustrating on my part, because as much as I wanted to help them, I wasn't able to, because they didn't have a complete picture. And so that's really key. You know what I mean? Just really you don't have to have everything, but we have to have something to work with before we go on straight to visuals. Because if not, you're going to be the person that change your logo every month or every week or every year. You're going to be the person that change your website, or in 2 years, we're not going to hear from you. We don't even know you exist, because it wasn't planned properly, So, and I know that we're talking about God being, the start or the center of our creativity, you know what I mean? And so one of the things that came to mind, even in regards to that, is knowing like what's your assignment, you know what I mean, versus something that you just want to do. You know, as a creative, it's like we know we have options, right? Tomorrow I can create a Shopify and sell bracelets if I want, right? But is that a part of my assignment? Is that a part what God has called me to do? Probably not. So it's like we have to be careful with just doing things because they might be profitable or because it's a trend and not necessarily what God has trained or called us to do, you know?
Hello, yes, absolutely. And you say that it's funny because I want to say maybe 5 or 6 years ago at this point, I was one of those people where I was just like, oh, I could do this. Okay, this is gonna make me some money. Or I could do this, or I'm gonna do that because Wanda over here is making tens of thousands of dollars doing it.
Come
So I'm gonna do it
on.
too. Right? But I didn't have a vision back then. It was just like, okay, let me do what I see the world doing. And it wasn't until like I honestly and truly had to take a step back and say, okay, God, like what am I doing wrong? And it's when I realized too. And now that we're speaking about this, I didn't have a vision and I wasn't aware that I didn't have a vision. And now after having really seeking him first and really trying to listen to what he has to say, I know what my vision is. And so I think and it's interesting because it kind of leads me into my next question. For us as creators, I hear a lot of times that the most successful creators have like a routine where it kind of leads them into a creative flow. What would that routine look like for you? Like what's one simple thing that I guess you can share with the listeners that you've implemented that has really helped you to allow God to lead you or be the CEO of your company?
So I'm going to answer that very transparently and say, as a creative, routine is like a swear word for us because we are just like, oh, like, things are going and moving and it's hard. I don't know about anyone else out there, but for me, sometimes it's hard to actually sit and be still, number one. Number two, it's like, you have so many ideas and all of these things that you're like, today I'm going to do this first and then read. Tomorrow I'm going to read and then do this. And so that's something that I'm actually still developing. But one thing that is for certain that I have really engrafted into my routine, regardless of what the rest of my day looks like, is making sure that I obviously start talking with God, at the beginning of the morning. I play a worship song or two, or, when I'm working, I usually have it just playing for hours, where it's like live worship. I'm really engrafting that into my routine because the atmosphere is so important for creatives that, some people say they watch TV while they create. I do that I might watch Shark Tank, while I create. But then
that's my show, girl. That's the show.
My husband is hooked on it. I'm like, you started at season 1. I said, my Lord. But so I think one thing for my routine is just taking out that space, to seek God, setting an atmosphere, whatever that looks like for you, worship song, journaling, taking a walk, poetry, whatever helps you, as they say, mindfulness, but whatever helps you meditate, before you start your day. And then what I started doing literally a week ago was writing down on a whiteboard, a big whiteboard I have, my to-do list for the week. I wanted to get it visually and out in front so I could actually, number one, see what I have to do. But number two, a lot of times as creative, we have so much on our plate that we don't actually stop and say, what wins did you have today? What wins did you have this week? Wow, I created 4 websites. Well, because visually I see it, right? Up until this point, I would created it, but I wasn't like taking time to celebrate your work or, because I'm creating for so many people, I often struggle with still having time to create content for me or for Boxbreaker. And so, those are 2 things that, like I said, I would, number one, recommend, just like I said, quiet time, meditation, and then, visually write down what it is you have to do for the day. I know some people do time blocking. So I'm working on that. That's my goal for this year, to actually learn time blocking and the art of it. But for now, I'm starting with my whiteboard and like TaskRabbit, the app, just so I can keep track of what I'm doing, because it's going to help you in the long run as a creative to see what's your creative rate. You know what I mean? Like, how much can you create in this amount of time? How much, how long it takes, and it goes into pricing, which is a whole nother thing. But that's just those 2 things to answer your question.
It's
so interesting that you say that, you know, creators don't have a routine. Well, you know, most creators don't have like a really set routine. And I 100% agree. But for me,
Mhm.
I think when I think of routine, the only thing that I really will say is concrete is I use my to do. I think it's
Mhm.
on app. Do you have, if you're an Apple user, then you know what I'm talking about. It's like a to do list, and then I use notes,
Right.
and it's
Right.
kind of like that whiteboard that you're mentioning, right? So for me, my
Right.
structure looks like I brain dump in the morning. That's my only
Mhm.
routine, is to brain dump in the morning. And every time I check something off, I'm a big foodie. So
Mm.
every time I check something off, I definitely go grab like a snack or something light and
Yes.
sweet. Just that's how I celebrate my wins with food.
That's good.
Um,
I might try that because I'm trying to lose weight, but I might grab an apple or something. That's
oh
good
yeah.
though.
Speaking of losing weight, you know, I thought about replacing my cookies with grapes, but I don't know if God
Just
really
didn't work
told me.
out.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if he was in that yet, you know?
I don't know. So I'm gonna wait for him to be like, yes, go ahead, switch
Yes, wait
it.
for him to speak. We need clarity.
So yeah, and honestly, but yeah, I can completely relate because for me, it'll be like 1 in the morning. And I'm like, oh, you know what? I need to do this, and it's just like a new
Mhm.
ideal from our brand for my brand or like my business. And here I am supposed to be sleeping, but now I want to wake up and do this, or when I should have probably did this at 10 a.m. instead of 1 a.m.
Right.
So it's just kind of for me, just finding that really steady balance and just writing everything down. And that makes me feel a lot better for structure, well, structure
Right.
wise, when it's coming to like my creative process as well. And then
Right.
kind
Because
of,
I'm a whole night owl. So
mm,
that whole working at 9 a.m. God bless everyone out there that is able and willing to do that. God has not anointed me there yet, but 9 p.m. I got you though.
you got to do what works for you. And then it, again, it comes to like your own personal creative flow and how it leads you into accomplishing your goals. Because if you do your best work at night, then you do your best work at night. And I feel like sometimes people want to fit into a structure where they're like, okay, first I got to wake up, I got to do some stretches, okay, now I got to go do this. And if it doesn't work for you, then it's not going to work for you.
Right,
um,
right. I heard something very powerful the other day that was just saying, imagine how well our creativity would flow, or how it would improve if we would just go naturally with our body's flow, where it's like your body's
mm,
tired, go to bed. Your body ready to get up, get up. You want to take a break, your eyes hurt from looking at the computer, take a break. By all
mhm.
means, making sure you're getting things done. But how we are, it's very rigid. Deadline is at 5, so you got to. But it's like, if we would go back a step and just let our bodies, naturally, of course, giving yourself enough time. I'm not saying don't go naturally. If you have a deadline at 5, you want to naturally sleep at 4. But, just, and that's something that I tried to adapt like 3 days ago. And wow, I saw a major difference. Like my body was like, you're tired. And I was like, it's 9:30. I am not doing that. Right. And I went to
Mm.
sleep and I woke up like, honestly, most refreshed that I've been in like the last 4 weeks. And I was like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? So find
Mhm.
your rhythm, find your creative flow,
I,
so.
I hear you. I definitely hear you. Especially when your body tells you you're tired. For me, it's like, okay, I'm going to sleep. Only because my kids wear me out. My body
Right.
just kind of crashes. But I remember those days, right before I had my first daughter. I was like, oh, it's only 10 o'clock. I'm not going to sleep. Knowing good and well I was very tired.
Right.
But just listening kind of to your body is something we neglect. Um,
Right.
we don't do it very often. So,
Right.
you know, I am an Instagram snooper,
Yay.
just like I'm an eavesdropper for good things. So.
We all are Instagram snoopers, let's be honest.
But on your Instagram, you have something called keynotes. And I know what happens when I press keynotes, but can you
Mm,
kind of tell everybody else what happens if they kind of stumble onto your personal Instagram and see keynotes? What would happen or occur?
what would happen? I don't even know. No, I'm just kidding. So keynotes is a space I would say that the Lord had given me about 7 years ago, and just little small nuggets or tidbits that, or downloads, if you will, that he would give me, motivation, building your faith, anything from business to, Christian walk, really just short snippets of downloads, and then, expounding on that, of course, in the caption, and just really keeping it transparent, keeping it 100, it's funny you ask about that, because that's something as a creative, like I would want to develop into like a book or an audio book or something. I just haven't got around to it. So, I appreciate you for asking about that, because I got discouraged like not too long ago that, like, Instagram is flooded with a whole lot of information, you know what I mean? And you just kind of feel like, do we really need to put this out here? I could just keep it in my phone, with all the other, notes, but God really impressed on my heart, what I've called you to do is for you. And so I just pray that people are encouraged and blessed by it, little tidbits, and just ultimately to just build up believers and non-believers, to know more about God.
I love it. And listen, don't be discouraged, because I honestly love your keynotes. Like I said, I kind of go through everybody's Instagram.
Right.
and they really do touch my heart. And so keep it going. And when you said audiobook, I felt a little in my spirit. So maybe you want to pray for that and see where God tells you to go with it.
Amen.
But definitely keep it going and do something creative from it.
Right.
It's already creative, but create something from it, because I don't think he placed these words in your heart, or these messages for nothing. Yes, you're sharing them on Instagram, so people like me can see them.
Right.
Anyone, but still, if he's drawing you to something further with it, then kind of go with it, which I'm sure you will anyway. But
amen. Thank you for that. Keep me in prayer.
Yes, I will. So we have come to the point where we're at the drawing board, and if you listen to my other episodes, then you know what this is. But if you are a listener for the first time, the drawing board is just around where I will give you some this or that statements, and I want you to say or choose the answer that resonates the most with you without thinking.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, here we go. Netflix or on demand?
Netflix.
Okay. Wix or WordPress?
Wix, girl.
Day or night?
Night, because that's where the creativity flows.
Instagram or Facebook?
Instagram.
Comedies or actions?
Action.
Dinner or breakfast?
Dinner.
Okay. The Conscious Creative Corner podcast or the Conscious Creative Corner podcast?
The Conscious Creative Corner podcast. For 100.
Thank you so much, Keshia, for being here. So if my listeners want to check you out or check out your company, can you drop some handles for them?
Absolutely. So my personal Instagram is Creatively Key, and my business Instagram is Boxbreaker Co. My website as well is www.boxbreakerco.com. I would love to connect with you and to, creatively flow with you in whatever you do. So also just hit me up, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keshia.
Thank you.
Hey creatives, thanks for listening to the Conscious Creative Corner. If you like the show, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other creatives find ways to listen to our uncensored truths. Be sure to check me out on Instagram to let me know how you enjoyed the show. You can find me at Nearly Sia or Achieve Her Perfection. And if you're a struggling creative that's trying to find their creative niche, don't forget that you can sign up for my creative content business tips in the show notes, or you can visit achieveherperfection.com. I'll talk to you guys soon. This episode of the Conscious Creative Corner is brought to you by the Gourmet Goober podcast, a different kind of food show co-hosted by spouses and BFFs and all-round goobers JJ Outlaw and T Outlaw. From hashtag Chicken Wars to Baby Yoda, the Gourmet Goober covers everything in the intersection of food and pop culture. So listen, y'all, don't miss the show that's a little bit gourmet and a lot of ratchet. The Gourmet Goober podcast is available now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts.